Hi, I'm Tammy, and you'll notice that there's no response from Thomas. Um, this week's episode is called The Tragic Ending, and the reason it's called that is because I have to share some really bad news with you guys, which is that Thomas passed away this past week. I have obviously had a hard time wrapping my head around it. He died in a surfing accident, which is some comfort knowing he went doing what he loved the very most. And so this episode I'm going to share with you what happened and what um my state of mind is and what I'm struggling with. And I hope this is helpful because it's a form of grief, right? And if you're dealing with divorce and child custody issues and all that, and you're at the beginning of the breakup, particularly, it's a form of grief that you're processing. And we all process different types of grief at different stages of our life and with different, incidences that happen. So I hope that somehow sharing this is helpful to some people. And I also feel an obligation to our community and, the people that love us and love our dynamic to kind of share a little bit of this personal aspect of what's happened. And then I kind of have some thoughts about how we're going to move forward, but make no mistake, we're going to move forward. And, this is part of Thomas's legacy. It's part of what it's part of the legacy of our marriage and our relationship and what we've poured ourselves into. So this is by no means going to go away. Okay. So I want to reassure you of that. I will also tell you that I hope I don't seem devoid of emotion, as I obviously haven't so far in the episode, but as I'm relaying the story, I might become a little bit robotic just because it's the only way that I can, tell the story without breaking down and not falling apart, obviously, at the same time. I've also relayed this story probably in excess of 50 times this week, I would imagine, between family, friends, colleagues, clients, all the different aspects of the people in our lives. So, Thomas and I were in Idaho last week. If you listen to the podcast, the last week of April, that is, and so not this past week, the week before, I guess. And we went to Idaho to visit my two grown children and my four grandchildren. One of my granddaughters had a birthday, and as you know, we go up there from time to time, and so we were up there for that. Had a great week with the family. Great week, relaxing for me and Thomas. Little bit of work, but not too much, and just overall had a good time. Came back Thursday night. Friday evening, his mother came up to visit us. She lives about 45 minutes away and doesn't come up terribly frequently. It was kind of weird. We were in the car on Thursday on our way to the airport up in Idaho, and my mother-in-law called and said, "Dear, I just have this really strong urge to see you guys. I just have this almost anxiety, like I need to see you." And I just said, "Okay, no problem." And in retrospect, it seems a little like she almost had some sense of something was happening or was about to happen. So she came up Friday night. We had a great time. Thomas and I, if you know us, sing on a worship team at our church. And so we went over to worship team practice. Mom went with us, enjoyed, watching Thomas play his guitar. It was one of his other talents, if you don't know that. And and watching us sing. And, he was in his usual cracking jokes, jovial spirit that is so him, I guess. And came home that evening. We had just a nice, relaxing, normal evening at home, got dinner and everything. Saturday morning we kind of slept in, it'd been a little bit of a rough, week going on the trip, and you know how that can kind of exhaust you. So He got up about 9:30. He came down and spent the morning with his mother. I tend to be the late sleeper, so I slept until about 11 or so. And he came back upstairs to the bedroom and he said, I just had a great visit with my mom. And I said, that's fantastic. And he goes, yeah, we didn't argue about religion or politics or anything. And that's kind of their two key points of what they see opposite in the world. And I said, well, that's good. That's how every visit with your mom should be, you know. And he said, well, me and Isaiah are going to go surf. And I said, okay, well, are the waves good? Are they, are they up? And he was like, no, they're only about a foot. And, it's really crappy. And I was like, well, then why are you guys going? And he's like, well, I haven't been in the water in a week. We've been in Idaho. I really want to be in the water, and Isaiah wants to go too. And we're going to go. I said, all right. So he went out the door just normal. I said, have fun. He said, I'll be back in a couple hours. And that was it. He went out the door. That was probably, like I said, right around 11 o'clock on Saturday, April 29th. And so about 1 o'clock, I got a call from my stepson, Isaiah, and he said, Dad's in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. You need to get over there. And I said, well, is he conscious? And he's like, I don't know. You just need to go. So Isaiah and him had been surfing, and Isaiah looked over and saw his dad was floating face up in the water, and went over and pulled him out and, performed CPR and, did what he could until the ambulance came and took him away. So I got over to the hospital and was not prepared for, I knew it was probably bad. I mean, he went in an ambulance, right? That's never good if you can't walk away from the scene, but I didn't really realize how severe it was. I walked in they have one in the ER, they have one room that's like the big room, right? The biggest room in the ER, and it is called the trauma bay. And that's where Thomas was. And they were resuscitating him. And there was probably 20 people in that room. And, they're hollering orders and grabbing stuff and lines and meds and, just all the chaos that you would expect. And the physician said to me, we've been working on him over 70 minutes. And at that stage of the game, I didn't really know. I didn't have a lot of information. Now we're a little over a week out. And so I know a lot more. Obviously, I know in retrospect what was happening that I didn't have at the time. But he said, we've been working over 70 minutes. And he said, if he codes again, I just don't think he's going to pull through it. And I remember saying to him, please don't give up on him. He was in such fantastic physical condition and everything that I thought, he's great. I kept telling him his body's a great healer. Like, he broke his arm. He's like, all of his recovery from everything is like half of what most people is. And I just thought, he's going to recover. He'll be fine. Like, just don't give up on him. Just keep pushing. So thankfully he did not code again, and they got him stabilized, and they said, we're going to move him to ICU. So on the way to ICU, they got a CT scan, and the CT scan showed that there was a break in the main break was in his C2, which was his second vertebrae down in your neck. Your C2 is the second one. And then they said they also saw fractures in his T2 and his T3. So you have I don't know the exact number. I used to know all this, but you have about 4 or 5 cervical vertebrae, and then you go into thoracic. And then you go into lumbar. And so that's the C and the T. So, he broke like his second vertebrae, and then maybe like number 6 and 7, somewhere along those lines. So, at that point, they put a cervical collar on him. He's still completely out of it. And they had told me in the ER, they said, they were trying to figure out what had happened. And they thought maybe he'd had a traumatic brain injury, like he had just hit his head on something. He didn't have any gashes or marks on the exterior. And so they thought, he hit his head and, dove into the sand, hit his head, whatever. So they had started this process that they call hypothermic cooling or something like that, where they cool him. And if you're medical, I'm kind of, I don't, I don't know all the correct terminology, but if you're medical, you'll know what I'm talking about specifically. And so they did this cooling process, and they said, we cool his body down. It allows his brain some time to hopefully recover. And then we reheat him, and then they give him a certain period of time to see if he'll wake up, because, walking in that ER, you could just feel that the spirit of who Thomas is was not in that room, right? He's a very upbeat, jovial, vibrant, just, active person. And so the absence of that part of his spirit was very heavily felt by me. Um, so so they start this cooling process, and that was in the ER before they transferred him up. So I'm sorry, I went a little bit out of order on you there. I'm trying to my brain is as you can tell, I'm sure if you've listened to us a lot, you can tell I have a little bit of rambling. I'm a little bit still in shock, obviously. Um so in the ER, so once they got the CT scan and we got into ICU and they said he's got these 3 breaks, they said we want to go back and get a second CT, and we want to get a little bit closer look at those blood vessels in his neck. And so they got a second CT and they came back and they said the artery that runs through one of the arteries that runs through the right side of the vertebrae um, dissected. And that was really the thing that, was sort of the final nail in the coffin, so to speak, to use probably a poor choice of terms. But um, once that artery came apart, dissected in that way, they said that the blood flow to his brain had been reduced by, I think the doctor's estimate to me was around 60% or so. He said probably close to 2/3. And so once that had occurred, which none of us knew standing in the ER that was going on in his neck, right? Or even in the ambulance or anything. And so, but once that occurred, blood wasn't getting to his brain. So no matter how much they were resuscitating him or giving him air or doing any of those things, that oxygen wasn't getting to the brain because it wasn't being carried there by the blood, because the blood wasn't getting there because that artery was severed, right? So that's when the doctor came in Sunday night and he, assessed him and said, he doesn't have any involuntary reflexes. Like if your brainstem is still intact, you'll have involuntary reflexes. Your pupils will dilate. You will have a gag reflex. You will respond to pain. There was none of that. They checked all of that. Thomas never flinched. He never moaned. He never, like I said, the absence of the spirit of who he is was the thing that I felt most heavily. And so on Monday, they ran one final test called a brain flow, which I understand is something that they're required to do before they can technically declare somebody brain dead. And unfortunately, Monday night, May 1st, they did just that. So it doesn't end there. Thomas was an organ donor. So all of the ways that he has given and served this community and provided information and all the things that he has poured into this, I always say it's very fitting that his final act was also a gift to someone else, because that's just who he was. That's who he was to me every day. I know that you guys sense that as you listen to us and as you watch this, and that really is who he was. So because of the organ donation, which frankly for me, I have to say, and I hope I don't offend anybody by saying this, because I know I worked in the medical field and in cardiac surgery and cardiac transplant for many, many years. And I know what a gift that can be to another person. For me personally, it was still difficult to think of somebody removing pieces of my husband. That's a hard thing to process mentally. And so I remember having this conversation with him and saying, I really don't like that. And I remember him saying to me, well, ultimately, if I go first, it's going to be up to you anyway. So if you really want to stop it, you could. But if I'm gone and I can't use it and somebody else can have a better life from it, then why would you deprive them of that? So I sucked up my own feelings and we proceeded with the organ donation, and they did use his liver and his kidneys. And the interesting thing that came out of that for me is they told me that normally the cutoff to use somebody's heart is 59, and Thomas was 61. So they ran a test to see, because I said, "Look, he's in great shape. Like, he's been working out, trying to get his surf back. He's he's in really, really, fit condition." And so they tested his heart, and they said that his left anterior descending artery actually had two concurrent occlusions. One was 80% and one was 70%. So I guess he wasn't in quite as good a shape as we thought. And I know that if he had had a heart attack and that had killed him, he would have had to suffer. And I know that if he had had a heart attack and it would have decreased his own physical capacity, he would have hated that. He used to tell me that all the time. If I can't be here and be my full self, I don't want to be here. And, he was very clear with me that he didn't want to be kept alive. He didn't want to be on tubes. He didn't want to be any of that kind of thing. And so some of the decisions were very, very clear because of the conversations that Thomas and I had had. And, you may probably have heard me talk about losing my mom 10 years ago. And I think because of that experience, we had a few conversations, maybe more than what most people would have necessarily had. And so they did go ahead and take his liver and his kidneys, and they took him off of life support on Friday morning, technically 12:23 a.m., just after midnight on Thursday. So that helped me some, because the difficulty during the organ donation process is his body's over there, but I know it's just his body, but I feel guilty that I'm not with the body. But if I'm with the body, I'm crying and grieving and can't function. And, it was just a really hard couple days to be able to do that and allow the organ donation to go through. But once that was done, I've had a little more peace about it. And, Thomas and I are Christian. And so, there's a verse in Corinthians that says absent from the body is present with the Lord. And I believe as soon as Thomas, hit that sand in just the right way and his vertebrae broke and that artery severed, that was it. He was gone. He was gone home to be with the Lord. So life's much easier for him right now, and just got a whole lot harder for me. One of the things you're going to see over these coming weeks is you're going to see me walk through my grief, right? You're going to see me try to process this and try to handle this in all the ways that I tell you all to handle these emotions when you're dealing with difficult things. And, a divorce or whatever may not compare to this type of tragic loss in some ways, but it does in others. And I can remember, Thomas saying to me many times, I lost my first wife to cancer, and I lost my second wife to divorce, and the second one was harder. I can remember him saying that. And now I've kind of had it in reverse, right? I lost the first one to divorce, and now I've lost the second one to a tragic accident. So I really just want to encourage you, one, to just, I know that this kind of incident brings our own mortality to the front of our mind. And I would just encourage you to be talking to the people that you love, and making sure your wishes are known. It makes life much easier for them. The other thing I'll tell you, and this is a little bit embarrassing to share, but Thomas and I unfortunately had no life insurance on him. It had lapsed, and I was in the process. Actually, I'd called the week before we left for Idaho. I'd called to try to get it reinstated, and had not. He was going to have to do all the testing again and all that kind of stuff. So unfortunately, I didn't get that done, and we didn't have health insurance. We're in a category where our health insurance was going to be more than our house payment, and it just wasn't something that we could afford. And so we paid for our day-to-day health care out of pocket. And of course, this kind of emergency, it's obviously a lot bigger expense. The other thing is we really don't have any retirement accounts or savings to speak of, because we've poured everything we have into starting this business and trying to grow it. And it's all been just reinvested back in. Only now I have no attorney, and I've lost probably 2/3 of the income of the business. So that's really one of our biggest struggles for me and his two boys right now, who, of course, I still have with me, and I still am, moving forward, planning on sharing their time with their mom. And, I'm still I'm still their stepmom, and I still love them, and I still have that relationship. And so the three of us are trying to move forward together as best we can to honor their dad and his legacy. And I feel like this podcast and our work and what we do all day, every day is part of Thomas's legacy. This is what he's poured himself into for the last 15 years. And I owe it to him to not let that die, not let that effort die with him, and to push everything forward and to continue to serve you guys and help you. I'm not sure exactly what format the podcast will take on. I have a few different ideas. It will definitely, obviously, include me. So that part is easy, but how I want to go about it, I'm not sure. I don't know if I'll come at it solo, if I'll, come at it with a fill-in, if I'll come at it from maybe having other guests on, or what I'll do. So I can tell you the other thing that Thomas would want me to say in this circumstance is, if you died tomorrow and you don't know where your eternity lies, then I would encourage you to take some action, reach out to somebody, because the only thing that's keeping me moving forward right now is the fact that I know Thomas is in heaven with the Lord, and I know I'm going to see him again. And if I didn't have that assurance, this would be so much more difficult than it is, but it was just that normal Saturday morning, and he and I, neither one knew what was coming. We had no idea. So the thing I would ask from you all at this point is, if you could, I'm going to share our GoFundMe link, which is that I've created for me and the boys. And I'm going to put that in the show notes for the podcast, and I'm going to put it in the notes for the YouTube channel. If we've served you at all, if we've helped you at all, if you've gained value from this podcast, I'm telling you, now's when we need the help. The need is real, and it's probably the biggest burden on me at the moment, aside from wrapping up the law firm and doing all of those kinds of things. But I'm not going anywhere. I have as you guys know, I have my own coaching. I'm taking over Thomas's dad's coaching. I'm working with them. I am still doing paperwork services for people. I've got things in place to be able to do that the way I need to do it. And I'm doing mediations and all of those things. So, and I'm going to continue the podcast, and we're going to continue all of those things. So I don't want you to think this is an end. This is a transition. This is a new beginning, right? And it's hard. And sometimes it's a beginning that you're dragged into kicking and screaming. Many times, just like my divorce was the same thing. I didn't really want that divorce. I was dragged into it kicking and screaming. And I am being dragged into this transition, kicking and screaming. But I know that God has a plan. And I know that there's a reason for everything that happens. So please pray for us. If you're a praying person, send us positive thoughts, whatever the thing is that you do. And again, if you can share our link, I would super, super appreciate it. So into my normal closing, right? If you're listening to us if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit like on this video and subscribe so you get notified as new videos come out each week. If you're listening to the podcast, don't forget to rate and review us, and also subscribe so that you're notified as new episodes come out each week. And I'll see y'all next week.